I'm Tamara Jarvis. I am the Major Projects Manager at East Herts District Council. And Al, can I ask you just to flick onto the first slide? Thank you. Hi, we're thrilled to be able to present to you tonight on this project, which is so key to Hertford Theatre and to the town and to the residents and to the district. In fact, it's a really key part of our wider sort of cultural strategy for the district, and it's absolutely key for the town and creating that cultural hub and that real linchpin for the town, I think, which is so important to all members of our community, all ages. We're really excited. It's a project I started to join the team in 2018. I know there was some work that had gone on before then, but it's really sort of picked up pace over the last 3 years. And we really want to share with you tonight the work that's been done to date and what's going to happen over the coming sort of 2 years, really, which is the really exciting time as we move into build phase and actually creating this new theatre and cinema screens for the town. So as I say, I'm Tamara Jarvis. I run the capital projects team at East Herts Council, which essentially means that I run all of the major capital projects that are happening across the district. Obviously, we've got an ambitious programme at the moment with a number of projects in Hertford itself. Hartham Leisure Centre, as I'm sure you know, is just commencing its build stage, and of course Hertford Theatre. So 2 really, really important sort of health, well-being, leisure, cultural projects that are undergoing in the town itself, and of course other projects across the district, which include Grange Paddocks Leisure Centre in Bishop Stortford, and of course the Arts Centre and the major regeneration project in Bishop Stortford that is also underway now. So a real sort of investment in our capital projects at the moment from the council. The team that I've been working very closely with over the last few years, taking this project on Hertford Theatre forward, are of course Rhys Thomas, the director of Hertford Theatre, and he will talk to you soon to give you a little bit more background about the theatre and a little bit more information on the vision for the new theatre and for the project and where we're taking it. And then we're really pleased tonight that we've got Alistair Bogle from Bennett's Architects. Bennett's were appointed also back in 2018 to design the new building, and we've worked really closely with Alistair and his team at Bennett's to come up with what we think is a really incredible and exciting building, and we're really excited now to be taking that forward into the procurement stage of a contractor to actually build it. So Alistair will talk you through the scheme architecture and the scope, essentially what the building is going to do and look like. And then we know from talking to Malcolm that there's a real interest in particular on the travel plan and the parking and the impact, of course, that this new building is going to have on the surrounding area in terms of increased visitor numbers and how we're going to react and respond to that. And Julian Bullen, who is the project manager who has been managing the project now really since on his own since the beginning of the year, since last year, in fact, taking us right through the technical design stage of RIBA 4, we call it, so right through technical design and now through the procurement of the contractor, and we'll continue to manage this right through the build stage until we have our end product. And then I also know there's some interest in the business case. So I'll be sharing with you what I can about the business case at the end of the presentation, although I hope you understand that because we don't have a contractor in place at the moment and we are going through that procurement process, that some of that information is commercially sensitive and so remains confidential at this stage. But I'll be sharing what I can, and then all 4 of us will be delighted to take any questions that you will have at the end of the presentation. So at this stage, I think, Al, if you could move the slides on, and I'll hand over to Rhys, the director of Hertford Theatre, to give you a little bit of information on the background and the vision.
Lovely. Thanks, Tamara. And good evening, everybody. I hope you can see me. I can't see you, so I trust that you can. My name's Rhys Thomas, and I've been the director of Hertford Theatre for the past 11 years. And I've been deeply involved in the formulation of the scheme to ensure that it will deliver our vision for the future of Hertford Theatre and the work we do in the community and across the district. Now, theatres have been around for thousands of years, from the great amphitheatres of Greece via the wooden O of Shakespeare's Globe to the tiered grand Victorian theatres of Frank Matcham. All are places where people have gathered to share stories of the human condition. And the same is true today. Whether watching an engrossing play, enjoying a side-splitting comedian, or listening to a gifted speaker enthuse about their favourite topic, we assemble to sit or stand alongside friends, family, and strangers to immerse ourselves in another world, to laugh, to cry, to feel, to question, to learn. And there are very few spaces in the modern world where this happens with such regularity. Religious buildings, perhaps, but they tend to tell one story over and over. Football and sports arenas, certainly, and in huge numbers. Old Trafford is even known as the Theatre of Dreams. But the game itself is repeated each week. And let's not forget that in a single year, more people go to the theatre in London alone than attend football matches in the Premier League across the whole of the country. And throughout history, the best theatres have always been places for exchanging ideas, for chat, for fun. An environment where, whatever your ethnicity, belief, or colour, you'll find a place and a voice. Theatres are spaces to be heard in. That's why we have an auditorium and an audience, a place to speak and a place to listen. And the past year has underlined the importance of Hertford Theatre to our community. Whilst the pandemic restricted our ability to welcome people into the building, the delivery of a programme of digital and lockdown activity helped us keep in touch with our audiences. And I'm delighted they engaged so positively with us at such a difficult time. And the new scheme embodies the next step in the community's use of the building and enables more people to enjoy cultural activity more of the time. The 3 new full-time first release cinema screens enhance and diversify Hertford's economy. Improvements to the main auditorium and back of house facilities, enabling for the very first time full disabled access, as well as increasing capacity, will resolve significant operational deficiencies we face when we're presenting shows, enabling us to support a wider range of theatrical productions and ultimately become self-sustaining. And in response to the clear community support for Hertford Theatre, we've ensured that community access and use remains central to the proposals. A new flexible studio space and 2 community rooms will give increased opportunities for creative activity, and the new Riverside Cafe will provide an informal meeting place outside of performance times. But importantly, our work hasn't just focused on the internal use of the building, but also on how we can better respond to our surroundings, providing opportunities for visitors and the local community to enjoy the River Lee, to understand the story of the Castle Motte, and to experience the wider heritage and educational benefits. Cultural buildings of this nature can be genuinely relevant and democratic spaces where creative adventure is available to all, where the programme of activity is developed by a group of people listening and responding to other groups of people. It's about presenting the best possible work for the best possible reasons. And those reasons are not always economically driven. There's a balance to be struck, a delicate balance between growing the artistic offer alongside growing the appetite for the offer and building audience groups for an increasingly diverse range of work and participatory opportunities. But the question is, how will Hertford Theatre within this remarkable new building remain relevant for our audiences? And for me, this is best answered with 4 connected propositions. Firstly, can we come in? For the answer to be yes, there must be something you want to see or do. And if so, the building must be physically accessible and there should be a price point that works for you. Secondly, can we have a great time? Well, to answer yes, the films, shows and activities should be of the highest possible quality, the staff friendly and knowledgeable, and the service top notch. Thirdly, can we be kinder and fairer? As a cultural community organisation, we should do all we can to address social injustice and inequality. We should be fully inclusive and do as much as is reasonably possible to respond to the environmental crisis. And finally, can we be involved? Absolutely. As an audience member, a participant, or simply as someone who'd enjoy a cup of tea alongside the River Lee. So, to wrap up, I'd ask you to imagine a theatre space or series of theatre spaces designed to encourage people of all ages and abilities to share the experience of being involved with films, live shows, classes, community activities and workshops, even getting involved with the coffee and the sandwiches, and all playing their part in the biggest production of all, the building itself. A living, breathing structure full of people aspiring to the positive values of community and creativity. That's at the heart of this scheme, and it's at the heart of Hertford Theatre. So on that note, I'll hand you over to Alistair, who can share the architectural proposals in a bit more detail. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Rhys. That was brilliant, and I think I always when we've done these talks, I always come in and I always feel like a little bit sheepish that I get to show all the nice pictures and things, because we're just very much a small part of a very long journey that's happened with this, project and building, and we all know in the last year quite testing circumstances. And I think that the way that you speak about the building and the passion that you can see from that, I think it's really powerful. And I think that the position that we're in with this project is a real testament to yourself, Tamara and Julian and the rest of the wider team. And we are a very small part of this journey, but we've been extremely excited to be part of it, and we're extremely excited to see this building into fruition. So as you said, my name's Alistair. I'm one of the architects from Bennett's Associates. I don't know if you may or may not know some of our work, but this is a bit where we'll just flash up a bit of our work on the screen. But we're a practice of about 80 people with offices in London, Manchester and Edinburgh, and we've been around for over 30 years. I mean, not myself, but I'm obviously part of a wider team. And we have a lot of experience in commercial and cultural projects. I mean, these are just some of the projects that we've worked on in the past. This is the Royal Shakespeare Theatre in Stratford-upon-Avon, Story House up in Chester. We've got a long-standing relationship with the Old Vic and Hampstead Theatre in London, and obviously the Redevelopment Citizens Theatre up in Glasgow. So we bring a wide level of expertise to this project, but obviously we can't produce the things we need to produce without a larger team of complete experts, and we have a very large consultant team that have helped get us to the position that we're in at the moment. So whenever I talk about the building, I always start with this. I usually start with this slide because I think it sums up a lot of the way we see Hertford as a town, and how we want the building to respond to the place. When you think about producing a piece of significant cultural piece of architecture, I think one of the places you have to start is the context. We don't want to have something that doesn't feel out of place. It needs to fit with the context that it sits within. That works with function, but also form and materiality. And I like this picture a lot because it reveals how much of an incredible site the theatre currently occupies, but it also represents slightly a missed opportunity in what the current building does. And I think that a large proportion of the work that we've been doing in this project is really trying to get a building that reflects the craft and the quality of the work that Rhys and his team do inside the building. And I mean, unfortunately, because of obviously with lockdown restrictions and over the past year, we haven't actually been able to visit that much to the site over the past few months. But it's every time we get to go back, we fall in love with the town a little bit more and a little bit more, and you start to understand the nature of the way the town is put together, the character of it, and that's something we want the building to respond to. And in a sense, the building is almost a contemporary reflection of the way the town is. We want, and the experience of moving through the town is something that we want to almost mirror in the building. And I'll allude to that when I get a little bit further into my slides. Obviously, and the strong nature of where the building sits obviously has a lot of heritage aspects and a lot of key pointers that we've wanted to reference within the new building. And then there's the wider story about opening up, the thing that Rhys talked about. There's a sort of hidden story around the building with lots of assets that currently are underutilized. And one of the key drivers for the project is being able to open up that wider story of Hertford to the local community. So, I mean, this is just a little diagram of the existing condition. It's a bit like the aerial view, and it kind of represents, we use it to sort of represent the fact that the current building is almost like an island trapped between the park and the town, and it kind of doesn't really reference either of those things. We wanted the new building to feel like a contemporary insertion, but we also wanted it to sort of address both the town and the park spaces and green spaces along the River Lee in an appropriate manner, creating that sort of heart hub building that we want people to come to, that feels accessible from all sides. It feels rooted within the grain and the scale of the town. Obviously, it also has to fit in the functions inside, but that's the sort of core things that we want the building to do. So the building concept is sort of developed as a series of interconnected brick volumes arranged around the existing fly tower. So after going through the first few work stages early on, we decided that in order to deliver the program and the brief required, we needed to demolish the existing front of house spaces. So we'd retain the fly tower structure, and we'd refurbish the roof that we have there. In doing that, that sort of unlocks the site to us. That allows us to sort of place a series of volumes that contain each of the functions that need to be contained within the brief around it, but also allows us to be a little bit more strategic about the placement of each one of those volumes. The nature of those blocks, they feel solid. They feel like they have longevity. They feel like they have quality. And conceptually, they are sort of carved objects, so they're solid carved objects. Therefore, they have a solidity to them, and joints and the way that they meet each other and the joints and the corners become quite an important aspect of it. Also, the quality of the material that they're made of shines through. So we wanted to use brick because obviously around the surrounding area there is quite a lot of brick in use, but we wanted to use it in a fun contemporary way, but also make it feel like it works within that space. And I think that line at the bottom about a contemporary building that also feels part of the town is that something that's quite important to us. It's that real idea about there's something new, something bold, but actually it feels like it's rooted in Hertford. It doesn't feel out of place. So ultimately we came up with a sort of ensemble of blocks, like I said, that each one is sort of been crafted to take the function that's housed within it, be it a cinema screen or a studio theatre or a community room or general foyer space, and but also then we'd shape the exterior of that block so it would feel like it would it feels like it has a sort of, it's connected to an exterior space related to it. It feels like it's part of it, has a scale and a character appropriate for the town functioning in and its placement along the river. It also has allowed us to have a building on that addresses multiple sides, so it feels like it's opened up. It feels like you can approach it from anywhere. It draws you in. It also draws you around it, because we know in our best, with our experience, these sorts of cultural buildings are the ones you want to suck people in. Then they have different modes. They work at different times. You want the life to sort of, the ebb and flow of life to sort of inhabit that throughout the entire day. So we want a building that is experiential. So these are just a sort of, once you wrap those exteriors and interiors with those brick volumes with that material, then you start to read this sort of really, it's sculptural, but it's also about function, and it's a building that seems to work from all of the key views. And when we've worked, this is sort of a form which has developed over quite a long period of time in development with, Reese and Tamara and the rest of the team, and also the local planners, in order to get something that feels right for this space, that sort of feels appropriate next to the river setting. It feels right for the heritage assets of the Mott, and it also has a street frontage which feels appropriate in scale for the adjacent buildings. So I alluded to the fact that the building's made of brick. So the brick is really important to us. And while we haven't, I'm not going to say here and go, this is the exact thing it's going to be made of, we do have a strong choice of a brick that we would like to use from actually a local brickworks, which is only 30 miles down the road, which is quite a nice story, to be honest. And as you can see from some of these images, you probably know Hertford better than I do, obviously, but there is a rich textural quality to the buildings around Hertford, and the use of the glazed tile that you see around the town is something that was interesting to us as well. So you might see how that interpolates itself through the building. And what we wanted to do was not have something too over the top, but use a material of quality and longevity like brick, but actually use it in a fun manner. And we've done that by having areas of protruding brickwork, but also areas of glazed brickwork that sort of play with the way the facade depth works, that allows the building in its long views. You've got a building that has these strong forms which can be read from far away, but in essence, when you get to, that's a 50-meter view, when you get to 20 meters, you start to realize the textural qualities of the building, and then it's something that actually works from 1 meter and you want to touch it. So that idea about a building that draws you in, feels experiential, feels textural, is something that's really important to us. And obviously this is just an artistic impression of what the building would look like across the river, but you start to see that you see those strong brick volumes, but they also don't feel out of place to us, and they feel quite appropriate. One of the other key aspects about the way the building addresses the rest of the site is the landscaping scheme around the building. We've worked quite closely with our landscape architects, who are called Fabric, and the part of the key functions about what we want the landscape to do is we want to sort of enhance the local conditions around each of these blocks. And obviously we have quite a lot of incredible assets that, as I said, we wanted to take advantage of, especially along the corridor of the River Lee. Now, at the moment, you don't really get to, the building itself doesn't address the river at all, and you don't really get to experience the river that much if you're inside the building, unless you've hired out the river room. We wanted to make this building a lot more democratic in the way that you can experience the river edge, hence why the building sets itself back, and there's actually a public footpath which connects all the way from the wash into the grounds of Castle Gardens, with a walkway that takes you around the Mott itself. Along that river edge, we've got a series of enhancements that have been agreed with the Environment Agency that would enhance biodiversity and actually strengthen the riverbanks in terms of flood defences, and and obviously make improvements to the park space right by the bus shelter on the wash side, with an enhanced public realm along the front of the building. So we feel that the tying together of this landscape team with the building together feels really strong in rooting the building within the town, while making you feel like you want to, you can approach it from multiple sides, and the way the building sort of sits is really, we're really pleased with. This is just some of the sort of zoom in imagery of some of the aspects of the scheme that are quite interesting along the River Lee. We're utilising minimal impact environmental means with sort of items such as coir rolls and sort of small planting from mainly British planting, to just enhance that river edge and give you a sort of a new space, to be perfectly honest, that you don't have at the moment. And obviously you have an incredible heritage asset, whereas at the moment some people wouldn't even know existed. We want to utilize that asset and make it part of our scheme. The idea of having a walkway which is made of very minimal impact screw piles, so it doesn't actually affect either the riverbank or the integrity of the moat itself, that allows people to engage more directly and potentially physically with that piece of Hertford's history, which I think is quite a powerful thing, to be honest. And then moving on to the interiors of the building. So I've sort of described this idea about a building of separate rooms almost, or separate blocks that come together, and when they push together, they get opened up. So they create thresholds, they create transitional spaces, they create hidden views and slight, almost angles that aren't quite what you're expecting, but that when you're in a room, you're always seeing the next place to go, which I think I alluded to earlier when I was talking about, that's kind of like the experience of what it's like moving through Hertford, if you imagine it, the sort of tight streets which open up. When you're in a central space, there's always another space that wants to pull you through into. So that idea of the building itself is almost like a distilled version of the town, is something that's really interesting. So that's why the materiality of the building on the inside has been quite important to us. We've worked with a interior designer on this project called Citizens Design Bureau, and they've been a great help in sort of thinking about how we would approach both the dressing of each space itself and giving that a distinctive character, but also how all of those spaces come together and form a whole, because we don't want this to feel like a collection of individual spaces to a degree. We want to make sure that it's a singular institution, as Hertford Theatre is. So this is just a sort of collection of images of the interiors themselves. This is the central space that you'd move into after you've come in through the entrance, which would just be over here, which you pass underneath one of the blocks in a sort of grand manner, which is quite interesting. And you enter a sort of courtyard space. And the idea here is that the finishes in this space are quite raw. So you'll see brick on the walls, which are the same as the brick that be on the outside of the building. And that's because the blocks themselves don't actually touch the existing fly tower that's been retained. So this triangular space around it is sort of almost like a threshold gathering space, almost like, as you could imagine, a courtyard, an external courtyard around a town square, in a sense, to use the same analogy about a building being a town itself. So then you move on seeing the interior spaces. These are sort of the enhanced cafe offer. So you get a comfortable seating, that you get views out over the river. So that's, now you don't have to hire out space to enjoy the river. You've got that all to yourself. Or to everyone, shall I say. And obviously that's over 2 levels, so you've got incredible views both to the west and to the looking from the south to the north down the River Lee corridor. And then so that's the sort of interior spaces that are sort of more the public functions. But then obviously we've got the performance spaces, and obviously Reece talked about how we're making lots of enhancements to make the building work really hard. All of the back of house space is working incredibly hard, making it accessible for wheelchair users. All of that's great, but what we're also doing is we're completely transforming the interior on a sort of for both performers and for visitors. So at the moment, if you've been in the theatre, it may have been a while, but it's really great, but it also feels a little bit like a civic hall, and that's not a knock on it. That's because it was. What we want to do is make it feel like a theatre, make it feel even more special, reflect the fact that there's an incredible amount of quality work going on in this space, so it feels like something special to go to. We're doing that with creating a rich timber interior, with a series of, with adding a balcony level into the space as well. So we're stripping out the existing seating that's in there, inserting a balcony level. What that does is it intensifies the space, intensifies the view towards the stage, makes it more intimate, makes the building, make that experience of being in there feel collective and special. So you get a sense of what that building is going to be like. Obviously, these are just artistic impressions, and we're hopefully we're going to see it through to be a really, really fun, special place. Cinema screens, we're obviously adding 3 cinema screens across those volumes. Each block along the front of the high street actually contains one of the cinemas in. So they're quite, they're dark spaces, but at the same time, we want to make them interesting and fun spaces. We've been playing around with the way the materials are being used in each one of those cinema screens, so they have a little bit of a character to them as well, which has been quite interesting. And obviously, there is a small studio in the building already, but we want to make a proper, dedicated, slightly bigger studio space, so it feels like it works in tandem with the main auditorium, but it's obviously slightly smaller. It has a different type of work that goes on in there, and it really, the two of those things work really hard, and they drive the business forward. So on a performance level, we've got a number of really high quality, really interesting, rich interior spaces that push the business case forward. And then the last items related to that we've talked about are community rooms. The building itself at the moment is a really important building for the community. As Malcolm said at the start of this talk, it's amazing to have so many people on this talk, because it shows how many people use the building and are interested in the building. And the community function of this building is incredibly important to us. At the moment, there's only really one community space, the river room, that gets hired out. We're looking to increase that to have 2. So you'll have one on the ground floor and a more sort of dedicated, larger dance studio type space on the first floor. That allows having those rooms separate from the studio as well, allows more community hires, allows more community engagement. And that's really what's going to bring the life to this building. So having more of those types of spaces is going to be really great for you, we hope. And then lastly, I think I've just got one slide about, sustainability. We, as a practice, Bennett Associates, we're not just paying lip service to the the impending climate emergency, and having a building that works for you, not just for now, not just for the next 10 years, for the next 100 years, is really important to us. So we've worked quite hard to try and make the building as sustainable as it can be. Now, theatre buildings are notoriously difficult to do this in because of the way they change their modes, but on here we've just written down a few of some of the measures that we've looked at to make the building as sustainable as possible. I mean, what you may see a lot of people, the way they talk about sustainability at the moment, about not demolishing things, not reusing as much things as possible, and that was our approach at the start of the building. We're using a hybrid structure of concrete and CLT. We originally looked at maybe trying to do the whole thing out of CLT, which is cross-laminated timber, if you didn't know. But unfortunately, just because of the siting of the building, and actually there's an existing culvert that runs underneath it, there were structural issues that meant that concrete did have to be used in some areas. Now, concrete's not as bad as what everyone always says, but having that hybrid structure has been really great for us. Sustainability is, to some degree, quite a boring thing. It's about specifying the right materials, understanding how to upgrade fabrics, and using efficient services. But all of those things come together and make a really meaningful difference. Then that's a sort of what we're doing right now. And then there's a sort of what we're doing in the future, which is having intelligent building systems which make sure when the building is operational, it drives down the operational energy use. We're talking about the way lights work, the way electronic systems work, all that sort of thing, to make the building as efficient as possible. And then there's just the idea, which is a little bit more holistic, about making building spaces flexible so they can accommodate change. You know, having the idea about a container that is robust and can take a number of functions, and then the contents are the things that fill it and give it life. We think that this building is very much in that mold, and hopefully you'd agree with us that having a building that looks great and people use it, if people use it and people like it, then it inherently has life, a longevity, and it becomes sustainable. And that is what we hope we will be delivering for you. So I think that's everything from me. But it's really nice to talk to you about it, and obviously, you know, hopefully chat about it afterwards. But I think next, if I click onto this,
thanks, Al.
We move from the high-powered level of architectural things to travel plans, Julian.
Thanks, Alistair. I mean, we are so proud of our architect. You know, Bennett's have done, we think, an amazing job. And whenever I'm talking to people about this scheme, I'm just able to convey my excitement and my passion for it. And one of the key things is the architecture. And I think it's a building that will thrill the people of the town, and wider than that, not only in terms of what goes on inside, which is what Rhys spoke about, but also physically its presence in the town. But all of that needs to be there and available to people who can come and travel to the facility. If you can't get there, then it's pointless having it. And so one of the requirements that we have to fulfill as part of the planning application is to produce what's called a framework travel plan. And if you want to know more about what I'm saying here and get into the further detail of that, and also to have a little bit more of a look about the scheme as it was in October. It's moved on a bit further since October when we submitted the planning application, but there is a planning portal, as you well know, and it's worth having a look in there. And all the supporting documents are on there, so you can actually have a look at these documents for yourself. So I've just extracted what I felt was some key and pertinent points for you about travel. And it's interesting, Alistair finished on sustainability, and I just like you to keep in your minds as I'm speaking sustainability in travel, and I think that's a really important thing for us. So within the planning application, there's a framework travel plan that was developed by a specialist consultancy called Vectos, who are a highways consultant, and their mission statement was to put in place management tools to enable informed choices and minimize environmental impacts. And the document that they've produced contains all the relevant information to effectively implement and monitor the travel plan. And it includes sustainable access options, which they've looked at, objectives and targets for the travel plan. And the travel plan will be a living document that doesn't last just with the planning application, but runs for a period of about 5 years. Within this same document, within this framework document, there's a travel plan strategy, talks about management, marketing, and consultation. It also talks about measures and initiatives, and also, which I think is quite cool and quite sensible, it thinks about monitoring and review of the programme and how that goes forward. So it's not something that we just do once and then we forget and go away from and sits on a shelf and we forget about it, but it's something that's living and carries through. And there's also, I love action, there's an action plan. If you could take me to the next slide, Al, that'd be great. So let's just look at some of those things. Sustainable access options. The consultants did an independent study of Hertford, and their conclusions and observations were these. There were many more than just these three, but these are maybe three of the core ones. They said that much of Hertford is within acceptable walking and cycling distance, rail and bus options within 1 kilometre, which you all know about, the bus stop actually physically outside the theatre. And it provides a real choice about how people travel with the potential to reduce reliance on private car. So that's where my sustainability theme comes in. And the objectives of this, the high level aims, and this is really important, I think, it's to reduce the number of single occupancy cars arriving at the site by facilitating the use of more sustainable alternatives. So we want to change people's thinking and change their approach to more sustainable mechanisms. So they set some targets, which they describe as measurable goals. Number one, appoint a travel plan coordinator prior to occupation, and that person will remain with the theatre, and it's a part-time position, and their job is to coordinate some baseline travel surveys and to help with the development of the plan going forward. Other targets are to submit a final travel plan within 6 months of occupation. One of the challenges we've got at the moment is with COVID, travel patterns are very different from what they will be post-COVID. So we're going to have to be quite agile in terms of monitoring this and developing this plan, but there will be a travel plan within 6 months of occupation that reflects the travel patterns and the use and occupation of the theatre over those first 6 months. And another target is a decrease in single occupancy trips by staff and visitors. And we've got a hard target there, 10% reduction in 3 years. So we've got some great targets there, some measurable goals that can be measured going forward. If you could take me to the next slide, Al. One of the issues that came up through the consultation process and was raised even at the planning panel meeting was car parking. And it's one of the issues which we've had a real concern about in terms of how to approach this and what to do. And our priority on this, to be honest, or one of the key priorities, is for the disabled. At the moment, a disabled person who arrives at the theatre, we make provision for them by opening up the barrier and enabling them to be dropped off at the theatre. Otherwise, what I've seen people do outside the theatre is a car will just pull up into one of the bell mouths informally and sometimes not particularly safely and drop the person off so that they can get into the theatre. We've worked with the council's parking team, and you'll see this sort of Google Maps view of the existing theatre, and you see that little red line that's marked on there. We're planning to introduce some designated disabled bays immediately outside the theatre. So those are safe and proper marked bays that are designated for the disabled that people can use to get easy access into the building. In addition to that, within St Andrew's car park, which you'll have seen a snippet of that on Al's bird's eye view that he started with of the theatre, that is just over the bridge, just over one of those footbridges, we're going to introduce an additional disabled bay right next to the bridge, as close as we can. And then the other thing in terms of parking is we're looking at the use of car parks and what's available. And you may be aware that at Woolfields, our council offices, there's a 228 space car park that will be available evenings and weekends. And we think there's a rather nice journey through the grounds. And we've talked about making the site more permeable and the building more accessible. So encouraging people, if needs be, to use that car park. And we're going to be using our social media and our surveys and the like to signpost people as well to that car park, so they're informed and made aware of that opportunity to park there and have a rather nice walk. If you could take me on to the next slide, Al. So travel plan implementation. First of all, what we've done is we've thought about what the specialist highways consultant Vectos did, and we've listened to what the planners have said. We've listened through the consultation. So what we've done is we've introduced 31 cycle parking spaces and some covered bays. So there's proper cycling provision, so you can come and cycle. We're going to encourage people to cycle by putting lockers in the building so that staff and visitors can put their cycle gear away. They don't feel that they've got nowhere to put their helmet or their whatever it is that they brought with them. And also for staff, we're encouraging them to cycle and to use shower and changing facilities that are available at the theatre. And we are physically going to remove any other informal car parking from the site, and that includes staff. So the site is going to be very much focused on using sustainable ways to get there. And if you're disabled, we're going to make your life better and make this place more accessible. So that's a design, but without information and incentives, that design maybe doesn't fulfill its objectives. So within the theatre itself, we're going to have prominent details of bus and rail services. We're going to be giving travel plaques to staff, and we've got a great team of volunteers who come and work at the theatre for us on a voluntary basis. We're going to be giving them travel packs. Money speaks, doesn't it? Money talks. So we're going to include financial discount incentives when people use sustainable means of transport. And that can include cycling by using certain apps that people have. We can see what they've done on their app, how they've come, and we can give them a discount. And the other thing we're going to encourage is some social cycling events. We want to just promote the whole cycling agenda. And finally, the planning conditions are such that we've got a funded unilateral undertaking with Herts County Council to monitor the implementation of this. So from the project funds, we're paying Herts County Council as an independent body to monitor what we're doing and make sure that we're doing what we said we would do. And there'll be annual travel plan reports produced by that travel plan coordinator that we spoke about, supported by survey data and like for 5 years. So I think that's the end of what I was going to say, and I'll hand over to Tamara, who's going to finish off with the business stuff.
Thank you, Julian. So yeah, this is just the last slide where we wanted to share with you what we can about the business case. I mentioned at the beginning that the business case as a document at the moment is confidential. We are still, we are currently going through the procurement process for the main contractor. And of course, that means that this is all commercially sensitive information in relation to the costs associated with the building works and everything that we want to be delivering. So we're limited in what we can share with you at the moment is the headline. But I think what I did want to do is just share with you some of the headline information that we're able to at the moment, and also a little bit about the process of developing the business case, what's gone into it, and some of the assumptions behind it. Just to give you a bit of an understanding about how it's been developed, how it has supported the delivery of the building and the offer that we've presented to you tonight. So the first thing to say is that the business plan has been produced by Barker Langham. Barker Langham are experts in arts and cultural sector business planning. So they really know an awful lot about the industry. They understand how the industry works. They understand the income and expenditure and the assumptions and the pricing that goes alongside the delivery and the operation of a building like Hertford Theatre. So they have been with us right from the beginning of the project. They helped to work out the business plan for the feasibility stage, which enabled us to secure the funding for the project. And that business planning has then been an iterative process throughout the design of the building. It has been developed and updated as the designs have changed. It essentially reflects how the changes in designs have affected both the cost of the building, but also the offer. So the size and the number of spaces for hire, for example, the number of seats in the auditorium and the number of seats in the cinema spaces. So it's an iterative document. And it will continue to be so as we work through the procurement and as we work through the build stages and continue to get more information and more refined information on the cost of that building stage. As all business cases are, this one is based on detailed income assumptions, which reflect the anticipated number of tickets which will be sold for the cinema spaces, for pantomime, for live shows, and for the spaces for hire, as well as for income from food and beverage sales. As I've said, Barker Langham are experts in the industry, and so they've been able to use a range of sources that are available to them to make sure that those income assumptions are as robust as possible. So they have used existing income information from the theatre as it's been running to date, but they've also been able to benchmark against other comparable venues in comparable locations, industry-wide costs and trends. And as a result of this, things like occupancy rates, for example, are realistic for a venue of this type and size. Ticket prices are also based on a combination of existing information and existing pricing, but also pricing that will reflect the new offer and benchmarked against pricing in other comparable venues. But a key point to make there is that ticket and hire prices will be kept as low as possible across the board and will remain competitive, but will reflect the new building and all of the wonderful things that it is going to have to offer, and of course all of the work that's gone into getting it to where it will be. Of course, the business case is also based on a number of detailed expenditure assumptions which have been fed in, and these include all of those costs that you would expect to be found in a business case: staff, utilities, cleaning, building maintenance, insurance, marketing, office and administration costs, the full range. So with a sort of comprehensive understanding of income assumptions and predictions, and of expenditure assumptions and predictions, this has all been factored in alongside the cost of the project. So the total cost of the project is just in excess of £20 million, and this is going to be funded by Public Works Loans Board borrowing. The business case factors in the repayment of the capital and the interest for this borrowing. So the output of the business case, which is on this slide here, is essentially seeing the theatre move from a position of subsidy at the moment. So the council currently subsidises the running of the theatre in the order of around £300,000. And in year one of opening, the business case estimates that the Hertford Theatre will move to a position of surplus and a contribution to the council of around £110,000. And as I've said, this move from surplus to from subsidy to surplus factors in the cost of delivering the building. So essentially, it's a self-financing project, which I think is a really important point to make, because that means that the delivery of Hertford Theatre doesn't come at the expense or the opportunity cost of the delivery of another project, because it is not taking up council funds which could be allocated to another project. It is funding itself through the improvements that it is making and through the additional services that it will be offering. I think the impact of COVID is obviously at the forefront of everyone's minds. It's been a strange year for all of us. We are, I think, seeing shoots of recovery. Hope is in the air. In terms of the business case and COVID, we did look at what would happen if we opened under COVID conditions, and surprise, surprise, the numbers don't add up. But I think we're very confident in the fact that we have now a hugely successful vaccination programme. We have a range of successful treatments. And when the theatre reopens its doors in 2023, I think they will be opening with confidence that we can operate under normal conditions. But having said that, the new building is being designed to maximise health and safety and maximise audience numbers, and to take into account some of the changes that all buildings are sort of having to incorporate because of the response, I suppose, to COVID. So, as I say, I can't share a huge amount with you at this stage. Really just outlining what's gone into the business case, how we've developed it, and those sort of headline figures.